Hey there, it's Gary Parrish. Welcome back to the CBS Sports Eye on College Basketball podcast, where we sometimes discuss camel fighting, dodo birds, leaky black. Matt Norlander is here with me. If you're watching on YouTube, you know what to do to that like button. Shouts to Brandon Davies. And if you haven't yet subscribed to the CBS Sports College Basketball YouTube channel, also do that while you're here. Let's get into it. Today we are, of course, continuing our Summer Shootaround series that we're doing over a span of a few weeks. We're going through the top 10 of my top 25 and one in the order that the schools are ranked. We've already done number 1, Kansas, number 2, Alabama, number 3, Houston, number 4, North Carolina, number 5, UConn, number 6, Iowa State, number 7, Baylor, number 8, Gonzaga. So now we're going to turn our attention to Norlander. Take it away.
Let's go. Come on, Duke. Let's go. Let's go. Come on, Duke.
It's number 9, Duke. Let's go, it's Duke. Number 9, Duke. Shouts to Coach K. Blue Devils went 27-9 overall last season. They were 15-5 in the ACC, finished second in the league standings, 2 games back of North Carolina. Went to the ACC tournament, lost to NC State there, got a 4 seed in the NCAA tournament, then beat Vermont, James Madison, and Houston to advance to the Elite Eight, where they once again lost to NC State, this time propelling their in-state rival to its first Final Four since 1983. Duke finished, if you're curious, 7th at KenPom, 8th at BartTorvik.com. From that team, they lost a lot. The top 5 scorers are all gone, among them NBA draft picks Jared McCain, Kyle Filipowski, but third-year coach John Shire has enrolled the sport's highest-ranked recruiting class, one that is headlined by 5-star phenom Cooper Flagg. Again, I've got Duke ranked 9th in the top 25 and one. We're going to see what Norlander thinks about that next. But first, a word from our partners. Okay, Norlander, Duke as a preseason top 9 team, is that about right, too high, or wildly disrespectful given the amount of talent on the roster?
That might be about right. How about this, though? It's weird to think, but it feels true that this Duke season, think about where we were a year ago and the hype that entered the season, Shire year 2. There's way more hype this year, right? Right? Feels like there's more hype for Duke going into the season. Agreed?
I would agree, but that is mostly Cooper Flagg hype, not Duke hype.
It's mostly Cooper Flagg hype, but there's a ton attached to Cooper Flagg. Duke was number 2 in the preseason AP top 25 last preseason. And you've got him at 9. Hard to see how Duke gets better than... We'll see how the AP voters, assign them collectively. I'd say 4th, maybe at best, but this season will come with more because it is Cooper Flagg attached to it there. You have to have Duke preseason top 10 in my estimation because there's still plenty of veteran experience on this team, even though there's a lot of youth, obviously, with that freshman class, which is loaded, and we'll probably get plenty of minutes there. I've got 5 questions tied to Duke, and then we can get into the roster and all this stuff. Here are my 5 questions, curiosities, whatever. The 5 things attached to Duke heading into the season, GP. Number 1, will Cooper Flagg be a top 3 player in the country? We recently did our candid coaches and asked them to predict who would be the best player in the sport. Cooper Flagg won that by, I think, 14 percentage points over second place. GP might have it. I think Mark Sears got second place of Alabama there. So will Cooper Flagg be a top 3 player? Number 2, does Tyrese Proctor, does he get more consistency with his game and become a top 20 player? When we did our top 101 players a year ago, Proctor was rated as a top 25 player, and by some in our voting collective, top 15 to top 20 player in the sport. That did not come to pass. Will he be that? Do they need him to be that to live up to top 5 to 10 status? Number 3, how does this loaded freshman class around Cooper Flagg develop? And who becomes the number 2 guy? Will it be Kaman Malawach from South Sudan, a center? Will it be Con Knipple, who's a 6'5" shooting guard and should be able to fill it up a little bit there? Will it be Isaiah Evans, who's a lanky 6'7" wing, second best player in the class behind Flagg? You'll hear some Brandon Ingram comps inevitably, no doubt about that. And I like Evans's game a ton. Will it be Pat Ngongba, who's a 6'10" power forward? Who's going to be the second best guy, and how will the class develop around him? Number 4, can Duke win big? And by that, I mean win the ACC, get a 1-2 seed, despite having so much youth. Now, again, they'll have Proctor. Caleb Foster's back. Sion James is a transfer from Tulane. I think will be pretty good. I wonder how Malik Brown will be. They get Mason Gillis from Purdue. They've got experience on this roster, but the expectation here is you're going to be giving legitimate minutes to at least 4 freshmen. Can they win big despite that and basically go against the grain of the trends of the rest of the sport, particularly in this final COVID year? That's going to be a fascinating storyline to follow. And number 5, GP, how does Shire and this team handle all of the attention attached to Flagg, the Final Four expectations that this team, this fan base, will put upon that program, and the pressure that comes along with it? There's a lot here. Duke is super interesting. It almost always is interesting, but we have John Shire being, I'm not going to say gifted, because he went out, he recruited Cooper Flagg. He was the top priority on the recruiting trail of all prospects for Shire since he got the job, if not before. And now in his 3rd season running a program, he is rostering a prospect who is among the 3 or 4 most hyped incoming freshmen to the sport in a decade plus. And with that as the primary storyline, there's a ton to get to on Duke here. And I anticipate, for better or for worse, but ultimately for the better of college basketball, because these things help, in my opinion, lift the tide of the sport. The Cooper Flagg Duke story will probably one that requires an update on a weekly basis throughout the season. What are your thoughts on what the Blue Devils here have assembled heading into November?
So you said a lot there. Let me touch on a few different things. First, on Cooper Flagg, I actually think it's meaningful that the coaches we polled overwhelmingly believe he's going to be the best player in the country, because they should know, right? And coaches, I think, largely are maybe immune's too strong of a word, but they're hesitant to get caught up in the hype. I can't tell you how many coaches over the years I'm like, well, so-and-so's got the number 3 recruiting class in the country. And he's like, yeah, it's a bunch of 17-year-olds. Who cares? Like, good luck. They're just sort of dismissive of it sometimes. What we learned in this Candid Coaches question is that they're not dismissive of Cooper Flagg at all. Like and then when we started asking questions about who's going to be the best team in the country, we had coaches tell us Duke. Moore told us Kansas, but yeah. Duke got votes. And Cooper Flagg ran away with who's going to be the best player in college basketball this season. So I think the hype is real. And it's not just that they think he's going to go out and average 25 points a game, because they don't think he's going to average 25 points per game. They think he's just going to be an all-around, awesome, impactful basketball player who impacts winning at a high level on both ends of the court. So the fact that coaches believe in him, not just his coach, but coaches all over the country, that did mean something to me. Proctor's interesting because I thought of that too. Last year's list of the top 101 college basketball players in the country that we put together in the preseason. Proctor was very high on ours and higher on other people's.
Okay.
I mean, this is a guy who was getting, like, should he be a first-team preseason All-American? Like, people were talking about him that way. His sophomore season was expected to be a breakthrough season. It just wasn't. I'm not saying he wasn't better, because he probably was. But statistically, he's kind of the same guy as a sophomore that he was. And
if you watch the games at points, yeah. We watched so much. If you watch the games, there would be points where he was just not productive, not efficient, could tend to disappear. You can't have that this season with him coming back, Parrish, and thinking that if that were to happen, Duke could maintain a consistent top 10 status. They need him to become, if not the guy, capital T, capital G, something really, really close to it, and a Robin to Flagg's Batman, if that's how it's going to play out.
Yeah, like he needs to be what we thought he was going to be, right? But it all, I don't want to say it trended the wrong direction, but the numbers weren't encouraging. Started 34 times as a freshman, only 25 as a sophomore. His points per game did go up, but only from 9.4 to 10.5. Shots per game did go up, but only from 8.4 to 8.9. Shooting percentages from the field and three-point line slightly up. Free throw percentage went down. Statistically, he was more or less the same dude, and that's not what you're supposed to be when that's supposed to be your breakthrough season in advance of you becoming a lottery pick in the 2024 NBA draft. If we did an episode on Duke last season, and I assume we did, then I bet you we said some things like Tyrese Proctor could break through, be ACC Player of the Year candidate, and then be a lottery pick. That's what was supposed to happen. It didn't. And we'll see if year 3 is better than year 1 and year 2. As for, I asked you right at the top, is it about right, too high, or disrespectful? Obviously, I feel it's about right. I'm the one in charge of the top 25 and 1. If I've got them there, my answer is always going to be, looks about right to me. I do think no matter how the season goes at Duke, you will be able to look back and go, well, I should have seen it, even if it can be hard to see. This is what I mean. Let's say they're awesome. All right. Just like, oh, wow. Remember that Duke team with Zion and we didn't really know. And then they bombed Kentucky and the champions.
We were
and it
both
was like,
there, Indianapolis, man.
Yeah.
And
then it was just like, oh, buddy, this is something serious. We didn't know until we saw it. And then it was like, oh, buddy, this is the real thing. If they're that, you'll go, well, of course. They've got the guy who coaches believes going to be the youngest Wooden Award winner in the history of the sport, plus 6 other top 40 high school recruits, plus at least 3 first-round draft picks. Tyrese Proctor could be a 4th. Caleb Foster could get picked. The talent is incredible. That's the most talented roster in the country, period. I don't know if it's the best in terms of the way it's constructed, but it's the most talented. So if they're great, you're just going to be able to go, well, of course they're great. Did you see the recruiting class? Why wouldn't they have been great? They brought back essentially 2 starters and added the best recruiting class in the country. All right. If they're not great, you know what you're going to say? Well, God, of course they're not great. They were relying on a 17-year-old to be their best player. Good luck with that. It doesn't matter what happens. It's going to be, you'll be able to look back and say, I should have seen it. Even if in this moment, it can be hard to figure out which way it's going to go. Does that make sense to you?
It absolutely does. There's a wide variety of outcomes for this Duke team, and it should have national championship aspirations. Those can be legitimate, but there's also the potential that, you know, it might not necessarily go that way. Let's not also forget the fact that Shire, who has been obviously involved in this program now after post-playing career for more than a decade, each season that comes along is a new experience. And now what he's about to undertake here, he just hasn't had, he's never had. This is only year 3, so of course there's going to be some never hads here. But someone as hyped as Flagg, as good as Flagg, surrounded by as much freshman talent as Flagg has here. The past 2 classes don't quite match up there. But also, like, I know that Shire's got to be tremendously thankful that he's got Foster back, that he's got Proctor, that there's value in guys who have been there multiple years, Proctor specifically, and that you can have that in addition to, again, Zion James, who I think has a really healthy chance of being the guy who emerges here. Like, he came from Tulane. Most people don't know who this guy is, but the staff has raved about him. And he averaged 14 points, 5.4 rebounds, shot 38% while at Tulane. Him alongside Malik Brown, who played at Syracuse, averaged 9.5 points, 7.5 boards, shot 72.8% from 2-point range. There's a lot here to play with from a roster perspective. I do expect Duke to be deep. But if they wind up being a bit inconsistent to start the season, and if that inconsistency kind of lingers throughout, Parrish, that wouldn't surprise me terribly. But I will be surprised if this team isn't a whole hell of a lot of fun, because they have talent, as you said, but it's talent at all over the board, pretty much at almost every single position, and sometimes talent multiple spots deep there. And because of that, it'll be fun to watch them play, evolve, and grow, because this does seem like a classic case of a blue blood team that'll maybe take some time to really get to understand how to play with each other. But if we look up in February, they're really, really rolling. They're really clicking. They might have a number 1 ranking. I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Yeah. The transfer from Tulane, and just in case people are getting into the comments, I believe it's Sion.
Is it Sion? Okay.
But like I went and watched the interview with him. He was addressed as Sion. Either way.
I'll defend myself here. I've only said Sion because when Duke was getting him, someone on the staff referred to him as that. So I've gone off of their pronunciation.
It's either Sion or Sion. We've seen it both ways.
All good.
He's 6'6", so he's got, good size for the position. He averaged 14 points last year at Tulane, shot above 40% from 3. That's encouraging. Shot 36.8% from 3. 38.1% from 3 last season. But before that, had never shot better than 34%. So last year was unusually high, but perhaps that's the new version of him. But also, like, I was watching very briefly, I think it was Caleb Foster interviewing him, and just sort of noted, this is a guy who's won a bunch of academic awards and sportsmanship awards. He comes from a very good academic school. So it sounds like he's going to fit in perfectly there. And, if that's true, then in addition to Proctor being a third-year player and Foster being a second-year player, and, they add Mason Gillis as well, an experienced transfer, then here's just another older 22, 23-year-old fifth-year player. And I really do think probably in every era of basketball, but certainly this one, if you can supplement your very young heralded freshman class with older guys, it's just, you won't regret that.
Yeah, I think the roster build here makes a lot of sense, provided that these guys really come and click. I mean, Gillis, we'll see. Gillis could be classic case of off the bench guy, spark plug, and he has a couple of backbreakers in a couple conference games because he can hit the corner three really, really well. So we'll see on that. I will be interested to circle back to something I mentioned in kind of 5 big questions on Duke. Con Knippel, I remember talking to a couple of scouts on the road in July, NBA scouts who were out there just looking at other guys, and a couple of them had mentioned look out for Con Knippel to be a real breakout scoring guy right away at Duke as a freshman there. Maybe he will be. I don't know.
Here's the other thing. There's going to be somebody really talented who just can't get on the court.
That's going to probably be inevitable. Or to your extent, to your point, GP, averaging more than 10 minutes a game or something like that.
Yeah, Isaiah Evans might be a lottery pick who comes off the bench.
It could be the case there. Evans is
and I know they do that at Kentucky. I know they do that at Kentucky, but that's not normally what they do at Duke.
Yeah, I know. I tell you what, though, having seen a little bit of Evans, I can easily see situations in games where he is the MVP. We're talking about Duke having won a game because Evans was amazing in the second half. Malawach just played in the Olympics, by the way, for South Sudan. So that's a rare case of a college player getting Olympic experience and coming and playing in a forthcoming college season. He's like a 7'1" center. Who, when we did the who's going to be, I think I mentioned this on a recent pod, maybe. Mm-hmm. One coach picked Malawach to be the best player in the sport this season. I can't necessarily see that happening, but the point is, again, the talent is just loaded on this Duke roster, and how Shire goes about dispersing minutes from the freshman class will be intriguing. He had a little bit of this last year as well, but this is an even deeper and even better class there. So, yeah, there's a ton. It's Duke. What do you want?
Looking forward to seeing which one of these guys transfers to Gonzaga next season.
Well, they've had, and there's guys no longer on this roster who have not left for the NBA, but they opted to transfer out for one reason or another. No shame in doing it. Although, imagine that part of it is kind of wild to me. Go do what you got to do. There's no criticism, but the idea that you'd be good enough to play at Duke and then be receiving a Duke education on scholarship, but opting out. It's kind of wild. But here we have it. I have the schedule in front of me.
Real quick.
Go ahead.
Just on this subject, then we'll get to the schedule.
Yeah.
I mentioned they've got 6 top 40 prospects from the class of 2024, according to 24/7 Sports. It is Cooper Flagg, Kaman Malawach, Isaiah Evans, Con Knippel, Patrick Gongba, I believe is the way you say that, and Darren Harris. Trivia time. When is the last time a school enrolled 6 top 40 high school prospects from the same class, according to 24/7 Sports?
My first guess is that it's never happened because 6 is an outrageous number. Is this unprecedented?
It has happened.
Okay.
And would you believe that class, that the last time it happened, and maybe the only time it's ever happened, before this time, that class was actually 6 in the top 15.
That's outrageous. Kentucky?
It was Kentucky.
Let me guess. I'll say there are so many loaded years. 14-15 is my first guess.
The team would have been 13-14.
So
the class was 2013.
Okay.
It didn't turn out great, but this was the class. Julius Randle was ranked second in the class. Mm-hmm. Andrew Harrison was third. Aaron Harrison was fifth. Dakari Johnson was 8th. James Young was 10th. Marcus Lee was 14th.
Oh, Marcus Lee.
6 of the top 14 players in the class, according to 24/7 Sports, went to Kentucky. And then that 2013-14 team With this recruiting class, they went 29-11 overall. You remember this team. 12-6 in the SEC. Got an 8 seed in the tournament.
Yes, of course.
Beat Wichita State, Fred VanVleet as the undefeated 1 seed. That was in St. Louis. I was there. Then they beat Louisville in the Sweet 16, Michigan in the Elite 8, Wisconsin in the Final 4, and then lost to UConn in the title game. 60-54. They were a 2.5-point favorite in that game. I thought about this earlier. So John Calipari wins the title at Kentucky in 2012. 2 years later, he's in the title game as a favorite. 1 year after that, he's in the Final 4 with the best team in the country.
That's right.
This dude could have reasonably won 3 titles in a 4-year span. And then you throw in 2008 Memphis, Chalmers for the tie, and 2010, where he's got John Wall, DeMarcus Cousins in the Elite 8, best team in the country. This Duke should have at least 5 titles.
All right. Well, this is a Duke pod, not a Cal pod, not a Kentucky pod. You are tapping into the exact reason why Kentucky fans lost their minds over the past 3 years.
Yeah, it's just wild to look at.
I know. It is. It is wild to look at. Duke fans, keep that in mind. If you head into the tournament with a 6 seed, hey, you could wind up in the title game nonetheless. But a number of outcomes obviously on the table here. Schedule wise, here's what we got. There is before we even get the regular season started, this has not been announced yet. So I guess don't write it in pen, but I'm almost positive this is going down. Weekend of October 25th. Special honoring and homecoming for Bobby Hurley. Arizona State Duke going to have an exhibition. They might need to be crossing some T's and dotting some I's on that, but that's a really, really cool, really awesome thing there. And I would expect that to be announced here pretty soon. But that's an awesome, awesome deal that's been in the works here for a little bit here. And then once we get to the season starting, they'll open against Maine, which is cool because Cooper Flagg's from Maine. It would have been even. I understand why they didn't. It would have been even more amazing if they traveled to play at Maine. That would have been phenomenal. And frankly, that's the kind of thing that Roy Williams did often. And see some other coaches kind of take up this as well. But Roy Williams made a point of if he could any single player that came to North Carolina for the course of this is at a time when most guys stayed. If you stayed for 2, 3, 4 years, either play a road game where you're from or in the general vicinity, he would try and do it. Not going to happen here. Duke at Maine would have been phenomenal. Nevertheless, open up against Maine at home. And then the notable non-cons here. Kentucky in the Champions Classic on November 12th. They're at Arizona November 22nd. That's obviously the return of the home and home. Zona had at Durham last year in a really, really good game the first week of the season. They get Kansas in Vegas on November 26th, the week of Thanksgiving. That is the first in what's expected to be a multi-year series. This also has not been announced yet, but all intentions are to have Kansas and Duke schedule a home and home in the ensuing years. So you get the neutral here, and then hopefully, ideally, you get those schools in non-Champions Classic years. In fact, I think it's a 4-year run between Vegas Champions Classic and then one in Cameron and one in Fog Allen. December 4th, Duke will host Auburn. February 22nd, love it. Playing Illinois at Madison Square Garden, and you and I are on the same page on this. We want as many home and home environments as we can get. I am making an all exceptions no matter what when it comes to high-profile non-conference games in the month of February. Play them wherever the damn hell you please. The fact that we are getting a non-conference game, and we got this with Gonzaga, Kentucky a year ago. If we could get this, I'll take one, but this is the way until you had conference bloat and 20-game schedules and television networks dictating so much of this. Credit to Brad Underwood, who is scheduling like a madman this upcoming season and doesn't even have a top 25 team heading in, potentially, at least according to GP. And John Shire being willing to make this happen. And the leagues for facilitating this. February 22nd, Duke, Illinois at the Garden. That's awesome. Their ACC rotation is this. They get UNC, Wake Forest, and Miami on the home and homes. They're only at home against Cal. You heard me correct. Florida State, NC State, Notre Dame, Pitt, Stanford, and Virginia Tech. They're only on the road against Boston College, Clemson, Georgia Tech, Louisville, SMU, Syracuse, and Virginia. That is Duke's schedule for the upcoming season. Over under regular season wins out of a 31-gamer. GP, I'm going to set this at 24.5 wins for the Duke Blue Devils.
Okay, 24.5 for the Duke Blue Devils. Let's count it backwards. We're at 31. We're at 31. I'm going to say...
Home loss to Maine?
No, they're going to handle that. Okay. At Arizona can be difficult.
Will be difficult.
Will be difficult. I mean, I've got Kansas preseason number 1. I have to respect that.
Yep.
And then let's just throw one more in there somewhere because you probably will, right?
Okay.
So 3 non-league losses. Let's go Let's go 16-4 in the ACC. 7 losses. 31 minus 7. Oh, no.
There you go.
That got me to under.
It's reasonable.
Yeah,
This
I think
is like
you
the
put
third
a
or
good
fourth
number.
episode in a row you've gone under.
I think I'm losing my optimism.
No,
I didn't mean
on the
to.
same page. We're on the same. 24-7. I got him. You got him 24-7. I got Duke going 24-7 in the regular season. That's entirely reasonable because they got to play UNC on the road. Wake Forest could be a tournament team on the road. Miami will wait and see. They got to play Virginia on the road. You figure, I mean, who knows what Louisville will be. That's only on the road. Clemson on the road. They're going to get tripped up. I think 24-7 is a reasonable projection. As a reminder, the past 2 seasons under Shire, last season, Duke was 24-7 in the regular season. In Shire's first season, Duke was 23-8. So we've got him going 24-7. I think that's fair.
Speaking of 27-9 each of the first 2 years, 54-18 career record now. Finished top 3 in the ACC both years. Got a top 5 seed in the NCAA tournament both years. Advanced in the NCAA tournament both years. That's all good. But on the subject of missed opportunities, how often you gonna get to be in a Sweet 16 game against a team whose best player gets hurt, and then an Elite 8 game against an 11 seed? They were 7-point favorite in the Elite 8 against a 11 seed, and led that game by 9 points at one point. That got outscored 55-37 in the second half, lost it by 12.
Man.
That's a missed opportunity.
No doubt, and also adds to the spice in that region. NC State getting over and getting to a Final Four in a year when Duke had that opportunity. Duke is Duke, and then UNC was the 1 seed, couldn't break through. Very intriguing, and it's again to the Triangle area that only helps amp up the stakes, I guess, for the year ahead. But yes, Duke had a situation before them where they were certainly had an on-ramp to make a Final Four, but couldn't quite break through.
One thing worth noting, in the top 25 and 1, I've got North Carolina 4, Duke 9, no other ACC schools. Torvik has Duke 2, UNC 6, no other top 25 ACC teams. The next one on the list, Miami at number 27, Wake Forest at number 32, Clemson at number 46. So according to Torvik's preseason stuff, the ACC's only got 2 ranked teams, 2 preseason top 25 teams, Duke and Carolina, and only 5 in the top 50. I know this has been a talking point or a point of conversation, even debate within the league. Like, people think that folks like you and I and other people who talk into microphones and type words into a computer are not giving the league enough credit. But once again, on paper, whether it's human rankings or computer rankings, the league doesn't look like it's on par with the SEC, Big 12, and probably not even the Big 10.
We'll see how much that changes this upcoming season with the size, with just massive realignment. Again, these leagues are getting even bigger. We'll see how the ACC stacks up. Take me firmly for the over. I think you would have to agree that once we get to March 1, the ACC will I will take the over of 2.5 top 25 caliber teams. Someone else's minimally will break through there, and I think water will find its level. But that's why Duke, in part, scheduled the way it did. I've talked to Shire about this. I wrote about this last year. And, you've got 5 notable non-con games plus a 20-game league schedule: Kentucky, Arizona, Kansas, Auburn, Illinois. 3 of those 5 not in Cameron. So they're going to do all they can to hopefully establish themselves with good schedule numbers. But as always, it comes down to wins. And if Duke winds up with a 24-win regular season heading into the ACC tournament, then I think it'll be, considering what it has on the non-con here, I would guess that at worst, a 24-win Duke team is looking at a quality 3 seed, if not better, if it can pull that off. But a lot of high-profile stuff for the Dukies. Looking forward to seeing them and how they get out of the gate here in November.
I think that's a show.
It's a show.
Shouts to Devin Downey. Shouts to Chester, South Carolina. Shouts to Terry Teagle, legend. Huck Larnell. Thank you guys once again for listening to and watching the Eye on College Basketball Podcast. If you're not subscribed, please go subscribe anywhere you subscribe to podcasts, including Apple and Spotify. There's more of us than there are of them. That should be reflected in the comments. So do that. We'll talk to you a little later on this week. Till then, take care.